Now, I know you guys are going to be asking, why didn't I do 4-wheel steering? With this setup, I totally could have. I totally could have added 4-wheel steering to this thing. It would have been pretty awesome if this thing did have 4-wheel steering, but I contemplated it and I decided against doing that just simply because it would add just another whole level of just complicated setup and design. It would have been cool, but I wouldn't know how to turn the wheels. I don't want to do hydraulics just because that's too complicated. Then you're talking about hydraulic lines and this. I could do electric, but then that gets expensive really fast. And then I could do electric powered hydraulic, but that's still, you know, then I would need a big battery. I would need an oil tank. It's adding extra weight. So I did think about doing 4-wheel steering, and I decided that this project just isn't. I don't know. It would have been really cool. It's just it's too complicated. I decided against it. So I do want to add a piece of tubing like this right here to protect the rear of the what's this thing called? The differential. To protect the rear of the differential, but I'm not exactly sure where this should go because I don't exactly know where this is going, and we can't figure out where this is going in this frame right here until we know where the gearbox is going on the main chassis. On there. So until we do that, until we can build that part of the frame on the main chassis, then I can figure out where this is going on the frame, and then I can add, because obviously this thing's going to have a bunch of cross bracing around here, a bunch of triangles to keep it from moving side to side, to keep it structurally sound. And again, we can't do that yet until we know exactly where this is going, so therefore I can build the cross bracing around this and make sure that I can still remove this from this little frame right here. So, and I guess in the meantime I can add some type of temporary cross bracing just to keep it from moving to side, so therefore we can remove these bricks. Alright, so the rear axle is as far as we can work with it right now until we start working on the main chassis. Now, the Heim joints that I bought to redo the front end, they haven't gotten here yet, but that doesn't mean that we can't start modifying these spindles to accept the Heim joints, and that's what we're going to do. Basically, what we're doing is we're replacing these tiny 3/8 ball joints with bigger 5/8 Heim joints. Basically, all I'm doing is just making a way to put a bolt in the top and bottom to bolt on the Heim joints. That's basically all we're doing. That worked. Come on. Get in there. Don't get stuck. Uh-oh. This isn't working like I thought. Oh! Oh, that just hit me in the foot. Oh, it just landed on my foot. That did not feel good. Ouch. Let's try this again. There we go. So basically, all that did was mean that I can put bolts in the top and bottom of this thing, just like this. So I can thread bolts into here. So therefore I can bolt on the Heim joints on the top and bottom of this thing. Now, something I realized is the Heim joints that I ordered, which still haven't gotten here yet, unfortunately, they don't come with spacers. So I guess I'm making spacers from scratch. So it shouldn't be too hard. I only need 8 of them. Alright, so guess what? Those Heim joints haven't gotten here yet, and Amazon says they're not gonna get here for another 3 or 4 days. So, in the meantime, let's start working on building the main chassis. The first thing we need to do is start by building the frame where this gearbox is gonna attach to, and figure out where the Heim joints are gonna attach to on this thing. I mocked up the 4-link suspension for this thing on the back, just to get an idea of how the frame's going to be and all this kind of stuff. This is the hardest part with a project like this, trying to figure out where does everything need to go, how do I build the frame, to mount everything and all that kind of stuff. So this is always the hard part, but I have a pretty good idea on how to start this thing. Yeah, this definitely is going to be tricky, trying to get 4-link suspension to work with the front end, with the engine here. This has to go here. I'm trying to figure out where are my legs going on this. I'm thinking my legs are going to have to be like going over the transmission somehow, and the seat's going to have to be like right here. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to put the seat pretty high off the ground, unfortunately, just to clear everything, clear the drive shaft, clear the suspension, and everything. Yeah, this is going to be tricky, trying to get everything to fit in here. Let me explain how I'm doing the drive system. I don't think I've explained that yet. Now, I know it would be very simple if I simply just took this driven pulley off of this gearbox and just put a sprocket on here and just had a chain going from the engine to the transmission. That would be the easiest to do. Honestly, that would make it so much easier to do this if I did do that, but I'm not doing that. I'm doing something way more complicated. I am taking this is the 780 torque converter from Go Power Sports. I'm going to be putting a jack shaft in the middle of here and putting this on the jack shaft. I'm going to have a sprocket going from the engine to the jack shaft and then a belt from this to this. That is going to give us 2 clutches, 1 manual, 1 automatic, a variable speed transmission as well as a 6-speed transmission, and high-low with the gearbox and reverse with the gearbox. So yeah, it's going to be complicated. It's going to be very interesting to see how the CVT system works with the motorcycle engine gearbox and all that kind of stuff. 6 gears, variable speed, high-low. It's gonna be interesting, I'll admit, to see how they work together. But I wanna see what it does. So, but what that does mean is I have to put a jack shaft here, and this has to go here. Also, the mounts have to go here for the 4-link suspension. So I have to. It's gonna be pretty challenging trying to get all this to fit in this tiny little frame that I'm trying to build. So I'm trying to start with like this setup right here and then build from there. I think that's going to be the easiest way to build this, is just start in the center location and then build out from there. Alright, so now that we know where the transmission is relative to the frame, the main chassis, now we know the magical dimension that we had to know, which that is in between, the dimension in between the axle coming out of the gearbox and the top of the bottom tube. We had to know that dimension, and that dimension is 2.275. Now that we know that, now we can install the differential in the rear axle. We have to make sure that it's in perfect center because the shaft coming out of the gearbox is in perfect center of the frame, and we have to make sure that we mount this input of the differential and the top of the bottom tube with the same dimension. So therefore, when the suspension moves up and down and all around, the axle doesn't get pushed in and out.
I have a shop, buddy. Hello. This is the neighbor's cat. I'm not sure the name, but it keeps coming over to my house because I keep petting it. I miss having a cat. Mine died like last year. Nope, don't do that. Don't be eating cords. Don't want you getting electrocuted.
Now, when I bought these Heim joints for this project, for the 4-link suspension, I chose 3/4 inch. And the reason I chose it is so therefore we can use 1 1/4 tubing for the arms. And now what that does mean is we have to use these giant 3/4 inch bolts. That is way overkill for this project, unfortunately, to bolt everything together. These are huge and it's totally unnecessary for them to be this big. When I bought these, I was looking at high misalignment spacers for all these, so therefore I could use smaller hardware. But if I did that, it would have increased the cost of buying all this stuff, and I'm kind of on a budget lately, so I decided against it. So we're just going to have to use these giant overkill bolts. I think the next step is let's start working on adding the 4-link suspension to the rear.
I forgot to hit record. Whoops. But just pretend that I tacked this on. It's done.
So I just put this pulley back on, and now the nut won't fit on here. So yeah, that's great. That's great. So now I gotta redo it, and unfortunately I can't move this way because it has to be in line with everything. It has to be in line with the pivot point of the output. So the only way I can do it is just move it this way more. So gotta redo that. There's a little bit of moisture in the camera. I think a lot of humidity got in the camera, creating the fuzzy look. Yeah, there's a little bit of moisture on the inside the camera lens. Let me see if I can fix it. Fixed. Back to work. Alright, now that we've got the Heim joints tacked into place, I think the next step is adding the tubing to them, so therefore we can connect the beginnings of the main chassis to the rear axle. Now, I've been trying to figure out how far apart do I want this thing, because this will judge how long the vehicle is, because however long I do this, I'm going to do the same for the front, and then that's going to judge how long this thing is. Now, I think that this is a good length. Right now, if I do it this way for the rear and the front, it'll make this vehicle from the outside of the tire to the outside of the tire. It'll make it 9 feet long, which is a little bit bigger than what I kind of wanted, but I think that that's going to be a good size for this thing, because normal rock bouncers, they're pretty long. Alright, so I cut the drive shaft in half so we can kind of mock it up and see what it's going to look like. How I'm going to be connecting the drive shaft together is because this is actually 3/4 and I don't think that's going to be strong enough. So I'm going to try to find a piece of tubing like this that's perfectly straight and then slide it over just like this all the way, spanning the whole thing, and then just weld the crap out of it. And then that's going to be the drive shaft for this thing on the front and back. Just like that. Now, somebody was saying in the comments of the last video something about atomic axles. Now, I looked it up, and this is actually very similar to atomic axles. I knew that I had seen a picture of this done. I didn't know what it was called, but so thank you to the person that commented that. I now know what it's called. This setup is called this is similar to an atomic axle. It's kind of, it's the same concept, but it's not exactly the same. If you Google atomic axles, you'll see that the pumpkin or differential, whatever you want to call it, is a lot higher off the ground relative to the hubs to give more ground clearance, and atomic axles are actually, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time it's plate steel. So the gearbox, or the differential, pumpkin, whatever you want to call it, and the CVs are all built in. It's all protected by like a square tubing or plate steel, whatever. So this is going to kind of be tubing. It's all going to be exposed, but I will, if need be, I'm probably going to be putting like a skid plate underneath this thing on the front and on the back. Just putting skid plates on this whole thing just because it's a rock bouncer, a rock crawler. Now, because of how this is set up, because we're using CV axles and the differential, I can put this however high off the ground as I want to give us more ground clearance. But I didn't really, I brought it up a little bit, maybe like 1.5 inches or 2 inches, but I couldn't really bring this up too high off the ground because the higher I put this, the higher everything else is going to have to be to compensate. I can't raise this without raising the gearbox, and I can't raise the gearbox without raising the engine and the seating position. So the higher this is, the higher everything else is going to have to be. There's like a fine line, but it's like a triangle between ground clearance, center of gravity, or top heaviness, whatever you want to call it, and suspension travel. So you can't have too much of one without minimizing the other two. So there's going to have to be like a fine line between all three of them to where we have an equal amount of all three. So as far as the ground clearance, I did measure it. We have from the ground, from the bottom of this tube to the ground, is 11.5 inches. And the wheel space from outside of the tire to outside of the tire is exactly 5 feet. So it's got some decent ground clearance for what it is, but I could have had a lot more with this setup. I just chose not to because, again, it would just make everything super top heavy. And I don't want this thing top heavy. I don't want this thing like rolling over, rolling backwards, or I'm trying to rock crawl this thing. Now the Heim Joints that I ordered from Amazon to rebuild the front suspension, they finally got here. That took Amazon said, free 2-day shipping. That took over a week for those Heim Joints to get here. Honestly, I'm a little glad that they took forever to get here because now that I've mocked this up, I'm realizing that I'm going to have to build the front suspension, the front forelink, a lot differently to make room for the engine, because I'm trying to get the engine as low to the ground as possible, and I'm going to have to do some fancy stuff to make room for the engine up front, so therefore I can still have some decent suspension travel, and I can get the engine as low to the ground. So that's going to have to be for next video of this project, redoing building the front suspension, the front axle, the forelink, all that kind of stuff, make room for all that, and then possibly, if we have time, to start working on more of the main chassis. Now I've been racking my brain on trying to figure out where am I going to sit. Obviously I'm going to have to sit, in the back, right around here, but I'm trying to figure out where exactly, because I don't want to be. What I could do is put the seat way back here, somewhere like right here, and then have my feet in here next to the drive shaft, and have the brake pedal, gas pedal, whatever I had to put back here. Just have my feet here. Or, my other option, and this is what I'm thinking of doing more, is having the seat way up here and then having my legs kind of go over the gearbox and have to put like just a sheet metal to protect my legs from the CVT. So, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet, but I can't really, I can't put it like in the middle because then my feet's, I don't know how I'm going to do that. So that's, not really sure about that. Well, anyway, that's going to have to be for the next couple videos of this project. For now, I'm going to end this video here. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see ya in the next video.